Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the stories being followed in the upcoming edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Dave Frank, and I'm joined by North Coast Journal's Arts and Features Editor, Jennifer Fumiko-Cahill, and contributing writer, Nora Mounts. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Hi.
Well, again, we're lucky. We've got blue skies. We've got clean air. I think we are in a really sweet spot and a sweet place. And apparently, it's not just us that knows this. Jennifer, tell us what's the cover story this week on the North Coast Journal.
David Frank, king of segues. So it turns out that we are not the only ones who have noticed that fresh air, a little open space, cool temperatures are some of the things that make us love Humboldt County. When's the last time you were too hot or too cold? You know what? Don't answer that if you are a born and bred local, because particularly, Kali, who's our calendar editor, it gets to be 67 degrees and she is like rending her clothing and freaking out, saying, "I'm boiling. This is a heat wave." But compared to the rest of the country, certainly compared to the rest of California, I should say, we are comparatively pretty cool. We stay in a very mellow temperature range. The wildfire smoke that we had didn't linger the way that it has for other places that are having sustained smoke problems where they can't go outside. We are not 110 degrees in the summer. And while climate change is affecting us for sure, lots and lots of people will tell you about, ask any Humboldt old timer. So about those rains when you were a kid, right? And you will hear about how the climate has changed. Well, this week, Elaine Weinreb has our cover story. And she is looking at how climate change, as well as wildfires and now COVID, have contributed to lots of people from out of the area thinking about moving here and how that's affecting real estate prices, and, the difficulty sometimes of people who are working and living in Humboldt to find housing. So now that, we've long been this sort of gentle temperature, open spaces, really good weed, place to live. And now people are looking around and saying like, well, if I'm going to stay in the valley or something like that, the temperatures are getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And those temperature increases, we're feeling them too, but they're not taking us to 110 degrees. They're not taking us to a point where everything in our car is melting. So people who are interested in being sort of, the bougie version of climate refugees, people with the means to move north, are looking more and more. Elaine looks at Trinidad in particular, and the coastal town of Trinidad, which is, a beautiful postcard of a place with really good fish and chips, is someplace that, it's expensive real estate, but it's remote and beautiful and cool. And more people from the Bay Area and further south are looking to move. On top of that, the wildfires have driven people to take sort of temporary refuge, short trips to Trinidad and other places in Humboldt County to get away from the smoke this wildfire season. And as we look at the future, which looks like more and more wildfires becoming the norm, people are starting to wonder, should I go live somewhere that isn't quite as oppressed by wildfire smoke for what looks like it's going to be years and years of more to come. At the same time, COVID is making a lot of us who did not think we could work remotely before, work remotely. And so some people who have jobs that they thought, well, I can't leave San Francisco, I can't leave LA because I've got to be here for my job, all of a sudden find out maybe I don't have to go into the office, or companies are adapting. Certainly for us at the Journal, we've suddenly learned that we can do a lot of what we do remotely, which doesn't mean that we can leave because we still have to cover Humboldt County, but it's giving people in other areas more traffic congestion, higher prices in terms of real estate, some motivation to try living in Humboldt County. And what Elaine found talking to real estate folks and residents was that some of them have this idea that it's just going to be, I don't know, like Little House on the Prairie up here, and they can just come and buy a giant spread of land for nothing. Those days are over. but they're still looking. And it's something that can potentially drive up the price of real estate here, which locals worry about. Thad and I were having a conversation this morning, in fact, about what it might mean, though, in terms of companies that might be able to build operations here. And Humboldt has long talked about, and different pockets of Humboldt have long talked about how to attract tech business and things like that. And the next set of questions for us anyway, in our newsroom are, well, what does this mean in terms of opportunities for Humboldt? It might mean, some drawbacks in terms of housing. It might mean that we have to make some accommodations, or make some changes. But we are wondering too, what's next? How does this open up Humboldt in a way? How much of Humboldt should we try and keep closed? It's a lot of issues to be raised by these sort of three confluent events.
And then, so just to take that one step further, the article, I think, talks a little bit about the impact on current residents and longtime residents. Do you want to share a little bit about some observations of how this new phenomenon might be impacting local residents?
Yeah, Elaine talked to one woman who didn't want to be named, who was trying to find some subsidized housing, and there was some real difficulty. We don't have enough housing for the folks who already live here, and it's a bit difficult to create more low-income housing when there's maybe a lot of money to be made by making housing for people from the Bay Area. So it becomes more difficult. And if you can rent your apartment for more, or rent your other properties, your house, what have you, if you have a couple of places, in this difficult economic time, should we be asking landlords to not rent for as much as they can when, their futures are unstable too? It's a tough call. And it puts local residents in a tough position to a certain extent. Yeah.
And then with subsidized housing waiting lists being so long, some folks are resorting to small houses, RVs, and other ways to sort of absorb the pressure of the economic stress.
Yes, expect the tiny house folks to come back. Expect tiny house conversations to pick up after this, for sure.
Interesting times. Well, cool. Thanks. I'll definitely check that out a little bit more closely. How about you, Nora? Well, I know you contributed a story this week about election cakes. Do you want to tell us a little bit about, what they are and why we should try to make one soon?
Oh, sure. And I'm sorry, we've been so rude. We haven't introduced your coworker.
Goodness.
He is my coworker. That's a great way to put it. My faithful sidekick. This is Leroy. He's a 4th generation Humboldt County resident, actually.
Right on.
And lives in a tiny house. So, yeah. So he's hanging out with me today, as always. But yeah, it was a fun piece. Election cake came on my radar in 2016 when we were doing this crazy business just 4 years ago. And I think I was writing a different baking and politics story then. And it was just trending a little bit as food history has become more of interest to folks, and a lot of people fancy themselves as foodies. And now, of course, we have COVID and the pandemic, and everyone's at home with hoarding flour and eggs and butter and experimenting in the kitchen. So it seemed like the perfect time to bust out this old recipe, election cake. It dates back to the 18th century. The first recorded recipe was penned in 1796 by known by food historians as the original cookbook author, or author of the first cookbook that we know about. So that was in 1796. And election cake was originally called muster cake, and women would make it for New England villages up and down the eastern seaboard to kind of rally the troops or get people out. And that turned into voting after we had the American Revolution and we had democracy. So voting was supposed to be a better alternative than getting out your rifle and making things happen. So it's really kind of about, having that celebration around the democratic process and around the election. And so it's just kind of a fun old recipe to turn over again. It also has some old-timey characteristics. It's a yeasted cake recipe, and it harkens back to before we had baking powder, so before that was easily done. So the original recipe would have been with a sourdough starter. I didn't get into the whole sourdough craze this pandemic. I was a little busy with this guy. So I used a more modern recipe that was leavened with baking powder. But it does rise. And so you end up with something that's maybe comparable to like a turtle roll, if that name is familiar to folks, where it's like a tasty, somewhat sweet roll. And so it has some toothsomeness to it. And then you have dried fruit and walnuts in there. I feel like it's more popular in France. Although Ramon's makes a good one. I don't know what they call it. Yeah. And so it's a little bit like that. It's kind of like a snack cake. And I threw some dried figs, walnuts, and crystallized ginger in there. A good shot of Jack Daniel's bourbon, because these were, of course, boozy fruit cakes. I feel like there was often booze in those colonial recipes. And just something fun. We also turned it into cupcakes so that it would stay in step with the single serving etiquette of the times.
Sort of parlaying that observation that, that now you're made small size, single serving sizes. You mentioned a little bit about the portions in the original recipe. Do you want to tell us about the portions and sort of how the times have changed a little?
Yeah, definitely. The original recipe was probably intended to feed a village, so to gather people from the countryside and come around. So I think it starts out with 30 pounds flour, a quart of wine, a pint of bourbon, that type of thing. So a pound of sugar. So yeah, really these huge portions. And I actually scaled it down quite a bit. So it was just 12 cupcakes because a lot of us are just cooking for our family and that's it. But if you wanted to go out and I guess find a way to share these with your neighbors safely, I'm sure you could. Folks are getting creative about that. But yeah, most of the recipes I saw out there were for like an iced or glazed bundt cake.
So I hadn't even heard of this tradition before, but now I think it's time to start. I don't know. In our household, we've had the desire to bake recently, so we actually got a new hand mixer, and we've been baking. So like it'll be a thing that I sort of try. I miss the days when Jennifer would bring in samples. So,
yeah, that's over.
I know. I'm so bummed. Very bummed.
Nora did bring it to be photographed by Mark McKenna, who works with us quite a bit. Did Mark get a cake?
Did Mark get 12 cupcakes? I don't know.
You didn't get them back, right?
Yeah, I did not get them back, but I told him he could keep them. So that secret is with Mark.
Mark is just hammered on election cake right now. I think it's significant that there's booze in an election cake. That it's like a fortifying meal of a cake. It's a heavy recipe. I mean, like dried figs and dried fruit, and then also hooch.
Yeah, we need it all right now
to
get through the next 2 weeks.
We do. And I also love that you pointed out that the women who were making these cakes could not vote.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're talking about before 1920. And so it was a way for women to participate in the democratic process and encourage elections and get people out there and maybe even, have some ownership or stake in it themselves. And so that kind of is interesting as we're talking about all these issues that affect women very much so in 2020 and feeling like we're looking backwards in history on a lot of issues.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next project has to be suffrage cake, right? Somebody out there made some suffrage donuts, something.
Maybe suffrage teenies. That might be
right?
More.
Suffrage teenies.
Because they were busy after all that campaigning. Yeah.
Was that a pitch for a future article? Because I will take it.
Yeah, could be.
Well, I have to say, anything to encourage people to vote. I know in your text, in your article, that you alluded to how the times require us, or the times ought to inspire us to get out there and vote. Which is so hopefully our baking will do a little motivation incentive too.
Yeah, yeah. It was nice to have something a little light around the election because it's not a very light topic right now. And if we can just believe in the process and hope that it delivers a better outcome for a whole lot of people.
Leroy feels me.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's talking.
He's got the pre-election grumps a little too. Like, everybody just go vote.
Wow, he's a little young to vote.
Well, there is a proposition on the ballot this year about lowering the voting age to 17. So
not quite to 5 months, but to 17. Yeah.
But he looks old for his age, right?
Oh, geez. He doesn't look a day under 9 months.
Yeah.
All right. Well, excellent. Thank you very much, Nora. I look forward to connecting with you again soon sometime to hear about the suffrage cake.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Jennifer, what's going on the arts and features beat this week?
Well, we have for a smallish paper, when you go to pick it up, it's not too heavy this week, but it's got a lot packed into it. So among other things, we have a story from Kim Ware, our digital editor, about the viral mountain lion video.
Oh, that's what it is.
That's the video. See, before you thought you hadn't seen it, but I knew you had seen it.
I did, yeah.
So for those of you who have been sleeping in a cave, hopefully not near a mountain lion, in Provo, Utah, this fellow went for, I think it was a run, in fact. My God. Health. At what price? Went for a run in this canyon in Utah and thought he saw some little bobcat kittens. And don't go near them. Oh my God, stay away from the baby animals, always. It's the best advice you'll ever get. It's the only outdoor advice you'll ever get from me.
Yeah.
Stay away from the baby animals. And so
Smart.
A lot of media reported this when the video went viral. It's several minutes of him swearing and freaking out and trying to yell at the mountain lion and cajole it, say, go back to your babies and get away from me, and I don't want to die today, and having all the thoughts that one might have. Anyway, after that went viral, there were a lot of media who referred to it as stalking behavior, that the mountain lion was stalking him, but in fact, not so much. And perhaps you recall the state parks dancing guy, John Griffith. There was a wonderful viral video of 10,000 years before COVID, in which he was dancing with some California Conservation Corps members. And so this dancing boss video went viral. But he's also done an animal show, and he pops up now and then and does videos for state parks. Anyway, he knows a lot about animals. And so he made a video and he was talking about what that behavior really is and how it's a bit sensationalist and a little clickbaity to be calling it stalking behavior, because evidently if a mountain lion wants to stalk you, you will not get video. It will come from behind you and jump on you. And then I guess, I don't know, it's all over but the shouting, unless you have a pen like the woman who fought off the mountain lion a few years ago. I forget the gentleman's name, but he passed away only recently. But anyway, he was actually attacked from behind on a Jim Ham. He was attacked on a trail from behind, and his wife fought that animal off with a pen and a stick, which, wow.
Yeah, I totally remember that. That was Prairie Creek Redwood State Park, and that was when I first moved here, 16 or more years ago.
Right? And from then on, it's well, do you want Italian or Chinese tonight? Well, I want Italian. And I killed that mountain lion for you, or I fought off that mountain lion for you. So I guess we're having what I want. You have hand in that marriage forever. All you have to do is fight off a wild animal, and then you are the queen in that relationship forever. But
remember the time.
Yes. But back to what Griff was saying, as he's known, the behavior that the mother mountain lion showed was more of a kind of get out of here vibe. It's called escorting. And so you see someone near your little cubs, and you approach them and you just keep walking them back and walking them back. And she looks back at her cubs now and then, and she just keeps walking him back and walking him back. She doesn't really run at him or lunge. She's just pushing him back and back, further and further away from her cubs. And then eventually, when he's able to snag a rock and chuck it at her, she takes off. And they don't really evidently want trouble from us. They don't want to be near humans. They don't want to eat us. There are easier and probably tastier things to eat than us. And the advice that he gives for if you see a mountain lion, which first of all, don't go on these trails alone. Have a buddy so that person can chuck said rock while you get big. The idea is that you get big and more intimidating, that you just make yourself as large as possible by putting your arms up, shouting. Basically, the reason I wear heels. And you sort of let it know that you are not to be messed with, and then you never turn your back on it, never run away, and hope for the best.
Yeah.
But really staying away from them, making noise, letting them know you're coming, seems to be the best avoidance. And if you see the babies, oh my God, don't go near the babies.
They're cute, but
yeah, and it's cool to get your viral video, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it worth it?
It can't be.
It can't be.
Right.
It can't be. But don't mess with moms in general. Maybe that's the theme for our week. Yeah. And then the other thing that's in the paper is, as a odd thing that I don't always do, I reviewed a movie this week. Well, not a movie, but a horror series.
Oh, cool.
And so if you are feeling like you need to get into spooky season, I strongly recommend the adaptation that Netflix has, a 9-part series adaptation of Henry James's The Turn of the Screw, which is The Haunting of Bly Manor. And it's so spooky. I haven't slept. And it was really good and enjoyable. There are some pacing issues, but David, are you a horror person? I can't remember.
Oh, I like it. Yeah, I'm down. Yeah? Totally. Yeah. I used to go as a very little kid to the scare. I saw The Exorcist as like an infant. Like I was indoctrinated early.
Yes, same. Yeah. I recently asked my mother, why do you think Grandma let me watch The Exorcist when I was 7?
Right.
And my mom just said, well, I just think she didn't want to be alone. I was like, well, this is traumatizing. But as a result, I really love a terrifying movie. That feeling of being scared, and then crying. I like it when they turn sad. And this one is scary, sad. So I strongly recommend it for those of you who have my same problem.
Right on. It hits all the right buttons, maybe.
Yes. And we're not going to really do we're not doing Halloween parties. We're not doing, that kind of thing. So you can still scare the bejesus out of yourself at home. It's important to remember that.
Yeah, no, this sounds great. This really sounds great. Thank you very much for giving us these insights about mountain lions and scary shows.
Yes. I mean, it can't all be terrifying shows and terrifying viral mountain lion videos, but we do our best over at the Journal.
Right on. Well, thanks again, Jennifer and Nora. Really appreciate your insights today. That's just about going to do it for us this week. North Coast Journal is on newsstands now and available online. Check it out. Stay informed. Again, thanks so much, and we'll see you again next week, Jennifer.
And vote. Don't forget to vote.
Vote. That's right. Key thing. And have a election cake.
Yes. Eat some election cake.
It's the encouragement that we all need.
Wear a
thanks
mask,
again.
All of it.
Bye, guys.
See you.